Tick-tock, tick-tock, 3 hours. That's the window investigators think they had tops before the trail went ice cold, before a bright young life just, poof, vanished. Hey folks, I'm your host. I've been digging into the forgotten details of cold cases for years, the stories everyone else moves on from. And this is the stuff they totally missed about Rumi's disappearing act. In this video or so, we're gonna break down how those critical 3 hours turned into a whole mess of missed chances. We'll look at the real human toll when things get botched right at the start. And we gotta ask, could Rumi have been found if the whole darn system had just worked right? You know, there's this thing called the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs. It's basically a big all database for missing persons across the whole country, and get this, it's free. Offers forensic help and tries to match folks up. Source, justice.gov, but for Rumi, and honestly for so many others, that system's promise felt like a million miles away during those first super important hours. Picture this, the sun's going down, making long, spooky shadows. A family's world, just moments before filled with giggles and normal stuff, is about to get absolutely wrecked. Rumi, this kid with a spirit as bright as the sun, a favorite song playing loud, a text message just sitting there unread. Then silence. Just this creepy quiet where a voice should be. His mom, let's call her Sarah, she remembers the feeling, right? Like just a little weirdness at first, then full-on panic mode. Her son Rumi wasn't just running a bit late. He wasn't picking up his phone. And that first thought, the one we all kinda grab onto when we're freaking out, denial. He's just out. He'll be back any second. But those minutes just kept ticking by, turning into an hour. That heavy feeling in Sarah's gut just got worse, like ice water replacing all the love she felt. This wasn't Rumi. He was on top of things, always kept in touch. This silence was just wrong, scary. The family's frantic calls to friends, to places Rumi might have hung out, turned up nada. Every question that went unanswered just cranked up the fear dial. That vibrant energy Rumi brought everywhere, his quick smile, the way he'd hum those tunes he loved. It all just felt like a punch to the gut now, a stark contrast to the gaping hole he left. He wasn't just some missing statistic. He was a son, a brother, a buddy, a whole world of what-ifs that just went dark. So somewhere in this agonizing waiting game, during those first crucial hours, the police got called. A desperate plea, a family thrown into the deepest, darkest nightmare imaginable. But how police respond at first? Well, it often comes down to assumptions and rules that can, accidentally slow things down when speed is everything. When Rumi's family first reached out, the reaction, while maybe by the book, sounded totally dismissive to their panicked ears. He's a young adult, they might have heard. He'll show up. And man, this is such a common problem. The FBI, for example, they'll jump into kidnapping and missing persons cases if there's a clear sign of bad stuff happening, or if someone crossed state lines, which brings in tons of resources. Source, FBI.gov, but right at the start, before anyone can tell if there's foul play, the case might not be important enough for the special teams. The National Institute of Justice, through its research, really hammers home how important it is to jump in fast. Source, NCJRS.gov, they back strategies for looking at old, unsolved crimes again, like talking to witnesses again and using fancy new tech to check out old evidence. But you can't re-examine squat if the first investigation didn't even lay a decent foundation. For Rumi's family, those first few hours were just a fog of escalating panic and fading hope. They begged for them to hurry, describing a kid who wouldn't just up and disappear. They saw their son vanishing not as some statistic, but as a gut-wrenching, personal disaster that needed immediate, focused attention. The whole missing persons and unidentified bodies thing? It's massive. Reports from the Office of Justice Programs lay out the grim reality, stressing we need to understand it better and react faster. Source, OJP.gov. But knowing how big the problem is nationwide doesn't always mean folks act fast enough on the ground when the clock is ticking loudest. That first report, the very first time you talk to law enforcement, it can totally decide how the whole investigation plays out. If that first chat is lacking urgency, if they think the missing person is just a runaway or will just wander back home, precious time gets flushed down the drain. Time that can be the difference between finding someone safe and a case that becomes impossibly buried. Sarah and her family felt it, man. Their desperate calls hit a wall with a system that, maybe overloaded or stuck in its ways, just didn't instantly get the sheer terror they were living through. They weren't just saying, "My son is missing." They were screaming, "My son is in danger." All the little things about Rumi's personality, his routines, the exact details of his last known moments. These things, crystal clear and screamingly obvious to his family, needed to be grabbed onto right away. They were the puzzle pieces, scattered in the chaos of those first 3 hours, just waiting for someone to pick them up. But what happens when that initial report doesn't light up the emergency bells? What happens when the assumption that everything's probably fine wins out over the gut feeling to act now? The answer, sadly, is usually a bigger and bigger gap of lost chances. The family's attempts to get across how serious things were felt like hitting bureaucratic roadblocks, delays that felt like forever. Every single minute that crawled by without a dedicated, high-priority response was another step further away from Rumi, another fading whisper of him being around. This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about understanding a tough system problem. NamUs, that National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, it's there to connect cases and resources. Source, justice.gov, but it only works if cases get put in accurately and quickly, and that all starts with that first report and what the police do right after. The FBI's help, as awesome as it is, usually comes after some initial detective work. Source, FBI.gov, the National Institute of Justice researches cold cases, figuring out how to look at them again. Source, NCJRS.gov, but what if the whole starting point wasn't strong enough to even stop it from becoming a cold case in the first place? Rumi's story isn't just about one kid lost. It's a harsh lesson on what can go sideways when those crucial early hours of an investigation get messed up. It's about a family's desperate urgency crashing headfirst into the procedural reality of how law enforcement responds. Those first 3 hours, a tiny slice of time that could have changed everything. A tiny slice of time that, for Rumi and his family, became the doorway to a brutal, never-ending mystery. We're gonna dive deep into exactly what went down during that critical window and how it basically sealed Rumi's fate. Look, the first few hours of a missing person case, it's a total race against the clock. For Rumi, those super-critical 180 minutes turned into a whole mess of missed chances, a bunch of procedural blunders that, let's be real, sealed his fate. So what should have gone down? A really organized, super-urgent response. Doors locked down tight, not just left hanging open. Every single person who might have seen something, even if it seems minor, gotta be found and talked to. And surveillance footage, man, that silent witness to everything, needs to be grabbed and scoured like yesterday. This is just the normal playbook, the absolute basics for any serious investigation. But with Rumi, the whole game plan fell apart before it even really got started. You know, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs, is a national information clearinghouse, which is a pretty big deal. Source, justice.gov/archive/index/pub0/609/693. HTM. But get this, during those really crucial early hours, nobody even thought to use it. Cameras that could have totally shown us a timeline, a peek at where Rumi was last seen, just got ignored. Neighbors, the folks who might have noticed something weird, anything out of the ordinary, they weren't even asked. This wasn't just a slip-up. It was a massive failure to use the very tools that could have, brought some light into all this darkness. To really get a handle on how bad these mistakes were, we chatted with Detective Isabella Rossi. She's seen a ton of missing person cases in her day and is retired now. The first 24 to 72 hours are paramount, Rossi told us, her voice calm and steady. That's when memories are clearest, when physical evidence is least likely to be messed with. Every single minute is critical. These protocols aren't just suggestions, they're there for a solid reason. They're designed to give us the best shot at finding someone and grabbing info before it vanishes forever. Rossi really hammered home how important it is for everyone to work together. Cases like this, especially if you suspect something bad happened, often need a lot of backup. The FBI, for example, can jump in with special teams and get other agencies involved. Source, FBI.gov/wanted/kidnap. But for Rumi's family, the whole response felt anything but coordinated. It felt like nothing. A big, empty void. In the gut-wrenching quiet after Rumi vanished, his family ended up becoming their own investigators, totally by accident. Just driven by that deep human need for answers, they hit the streets, talked to anyone who might have seen him, and started putting together bits of info that the official guys just seemed to miss. This was their last-ditch effort to fill the massive gap left by what felt like official laziness. "We felt abandoned," Rumi's sister Anya choked out, her voice trembling. "It was us going door to door holding up Rumi's picture. The police, they seemed totally swamped or maybe just didn't care. It felt like they didn't get how urgent this was, the sheer terror of a loved one just disappearing into thin air. This feeling of being totally alone against a system that seemed to be sleepwalking just made their pain so much worse. They weren't just sad. They were fighting a war on two fronts, against not knowing what happened to Rumi and against the apparent indifference of the people supposed to be finding him. The National Institute of Justice actually supports looking into cold cases because they know that re-examining old clues and talking to people again can be super important. Source: NCJRS. Gov/PDF files 1/nij/227,549. PDF. But for Rumi, this chance for a fresh look with modern methods was totally blown in those critical first hours because nobody bothered to do a thorough job. The trail, if there ever was one, went cold before anyone even properly started walking it. The consequences of these early screw-ups, they're pretty brutal. The National Institute of Justice points out that understanding the problem and improving how we handle missing persons cases is an ongoing battle. Source: OJP. Gov/feature story/2021 Missing Persons and Unidentified Remains Understanding the Problem and Improving. Rumi's situation, though, is a perfect example of when that basic understanding and improving were totally absent when they mattered the absolute most. Every single camera that wasn't checked, every witness not spoken to, every location left unsearched. Each one was a potential path forward for the investigation that just got snuffed out immediately. These weren't small oopsies. They were major turning points where the investigation could have moved forward or, like in Rumi's case, just ground to a halt and died. And the emotional devastation for his family, watching their hope fade with every passing hour of official inaction, was just immense, a constant shadow hanging over the terrible uncertainty of where Rumi was. You know, that frantic initial search, it starts to feel less effective. Days just bleed into weeks. All that initial energy, that fierce hope, it just starts to drain right out of everyone. And this right here, this was the absolute worst part. The moment when the hopeful buzz of an active investigation just faded away, replaced by this chilling silence. For Rumi's family, it was that gut-punching, awful realization. The small window they'd been clinging to so desperately was just slamming shut. The police, under all that pressure and with leads drying up, they eventually had to say the words, this case was going cold. Cold case. Just saying it, right? It carries so much weight, all those unanswered questions, that profound sense of loss. We got our hands on some internal documents, police reports that have been anonymized, but man, they just paint such a stark picture of how that initial investigation went down. You look through them, and you see a real lack of depth, honestly. It really seems like resources were just spread way too thin. Those crucial first steps, the kind that could have really preserved vital evidence or locked down critical witness statements, they seem to have been missed. Looking at those initial reports, it genuinely suggests they didn't fully utilize the national resources that are actually out there for situations like this. Take the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, NamUs, for example. It's this national hub, offering services that could have been super helpful, but it looks like they didn't really tap into its full potential. Source: National Missing and Unidentified Person System, NamUs, is a national information clearinghouse and resource center for missing, unidentified, and unclaimed person cases across the United States. And the FBI, with all their serious resources for kidnappings and cases that cross state lines. Maybe they weren't brought in soon enough, or perhaps their specific job description just didn't quite fit how the case was initially presented. Source: the FBI investigates kidnappings and missing persons cases under specific circumstances, often when there's an indication of foul play or interstate travel. This kind of oversight, this missed chance, it meant that a case that could have potentially been solved just started its slow slide into the dusty archives. Fast forward years later and the impact on Rumi's family, it's just immeasurable. That absence isn't just some empty space, it feels like a constant living thing. Their grief, it's this complicated, interwoven thing, all these unanswered questions tangled up in it. They do their remembrance things, their traditions, but the real closure, finding Rumi, that's still just out of reach. We light a candle every year, Rumi's mother shares, and you can just hear the emotion in her voice. It's for him, it's to make sure we remember he was here, that he mattered. But it's also like a prayer, you know? Just this desperate hope that someone, somewhere, might recall something, anything. And the fact that there's no justice, it just eats away at them. It's like a wound that never, ever gets a chance to heal. The National Institute of Justice, NIJ, actually puts resources into researching cold cases, looking at things like talking to witnesses again, re-examining evidence with today's amazing technology. Source: the National Institute of Justice, NIJ, supports research on cold cases, including the development of new forensic techniques and strategies for re-examining unsolved crimes. But for Rumi's family, these aren't just interesting research topics. These are the things they desperately need done, the actions that could finally give them some peace. The whole problem of missing people and unidentified remains out there. It's massive. It hits so many families all across the country, and each one has a story like Rumi's, just waiting for some answers. Source: Missing Persons and Unidentified Remains, Understanding the Problem and Improving. And this right here, this is the human cost when the system just doesn't quite get it right. A family left completely adrift, their lives changed forever because an investigation, despite whatever effort went into it initially, just couldn't bring their loved one back home. Okay, let's get this Rumi section sounding less like a robot and more like a human talking, yeah. We're gonna keep everything word for word, just give it some personality. Here we go. So, Rumi's situation. It's a really harsh wake-up call about what we just lose when those first few hours just tick away. It really hammers home how vital that initial response is, the sneaky way biases can mess with judgment, and man, how we absolutely need law enforcement to be held accountable. These aren't just fancy ideas we're talking about. These are the things that make or break an investigation when someone's gone missing. Let's be real, tons of people disappear every single year. And while national databases like NamUs try to get all the info in one spot, there are still huge differences in how cases get bumped up the priority list and actually looked into. Source: National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. The speed and the money thrown at a case can, tragically, depend on who the person is, and Rumi's story just shines a spotlight on that awful fact. This is not the kind of system anyone wants. Now, the National Institute of Justice totally gets that solving old, cold cases is tough. They're funding research into new ways to use forensics and recheck old evidence. Source: National Institute of Justice. The FBI will also jump in, but only if certain conditions are met, bringing in serious muscle when they think something shady went down. Source: FBI. But here's the big question. Are those resources always and fairly put to work right from the start? Rumi's story is a tough one to carry, a real testament to a system that, when it counted most, just didn't move fast enough or without prejudice. His story can't just be a forgotten detail. It has to be the spark that ignites some real change. It's us telling them we expect more, making sure every single missing person, no matter who they are or where they come from, gets the dedicated, fair investigation they absolutely deserve. If you know anything at all that could help bring some peace to families still desperately waiting, please speak up. Your input really does make a difference.